In today's video, I'm revisiting the EJ205 with the low compression in cylinder 4, and I confirm exactly what the problem is. And then I'll dive into the backstory of this car, because the backstory might have just led to all the problems that I'm seeing in cylinder number 4. This is my little Subaru-only shop. It's a DIY Subaru channel. It's a channel where all I do is Subaru builds and race Subaru vehicles in motorsport events. It's a DIY themed channel where I walk you guys through the steps to get your Subarus back on the road and hopefully do a little racing of your own. So thanks for checking out the video, guys. I really appreciate it. As a lot of you guys saw in my last video, I recently ran a compression test on this EJ205 engine that you see behind me. And in that test, I actually found that cylinder number 4 was holding virtually no compression in it, which means there's a leak in that cylinder. And that leak is either coming from the valves, from the head gasket, or from the cylinder walls and the cylinder rings. So the next step is to perform a leak down test, because with a leak down test, you can actually pinpoint exactly where that leak is coming from. But before I did that leak down test, I actually did one more test, and I'm gonna show you guys that test right now. Alright guys, this is a follow-up to that last video. Getting ready to do a leak down test, but before I do that, I'm just gonna do a real quick test. Take the oil fill cap off and see if you actually have any combustion gases coming out of your fill tube, because that means the rings are bad. Whoa! Yep. What do you think about that, guys? A bunch of combustion gas coming right through the rings in that number 4 cylinder, coming up through your crankcase. Yep, that's rings. Number 4's rings are bad, 100%. Don't even need to do a leak down test. So frankly, what's the point of doing a leak down test when I now know that it's definitely rings on that number 4 cylinder, because all the other chambers actually have good compression. It's that number 4 cylinder that wasn't holding any compression. And as you guys saw when I took off that cap, bam, all that combustion pressure is going right through those rings, down into the oil crankcase, and it's actually venting through that cap when I remove it. So 100% confirmation that the ring seal in cylinder number 4 is definitely the problem here. It might be a ringland, it might be the rings, it might be the cylinder walls that have worn, but either way, it's definitely number 4, and that definitely means I'm going to have to pull this engine and get a new short block. As you guys saw in that little clip, when I took that oil fill tube cap off, you can instantly see all that combustion gas blow by that's escaping past the rings, and it's actually building up pressure in the crankcase. That's exactly what that burst of vapors was when I removed that cap. It's actually a combination of combustion gases and aerated oil that's bursting out of that cap because it's actually building pressure in my crankcase. And that, guys, means there's only one place that this thing is leaking from, and that's through the rings and the cylinder walls. There's no need for leak down tests, so I'm not going to perform it. There's definitely a problem with the rings and the ring seal on the cylinder walls. It could actually be a broken ringland on the piston, or it could just be worn rings and worn cylinder walls. And the backstory on this car is actually consistent with there being a problem with those rings and those cylinder walls. Because here's the backstory, guys. When I first bought this car, the previous owner said it had blown head gaskets, but he actually said it had been sitting for an extended period of time, and I think it actually had been sitting for multiple years. And then when we started talking about it in more detail, he said that every few months he'd fire up the car and drive around a block because he heard that leaving the car sitting for a long time would actually be bad for it. And he thought that even though it had a blown head gasket, that firing up the car every 3 or 4 months and just driving around the block until it kind of got to the point where it started to overheat was a good idea, and then he'd bring it back to his house and then park it in the back. It actually had a blown head gasket on that driver's side where cylinder number 2 and number 4 was. So I suspect it was actually coolant that was sitting in that number 4 cylinder, and that coolant that was sitting in that number 4 cylinder would actually just help those rings wear down those cylinder walls and create a bigger and bigger gap until it could no longer hold a good ring seal in there. In addition to that happening to it, before this car had a blown head gasket, it was actually used in motorsport activities. It actually had a larger turbo on it, had larger injectors on it, and it definitely had a stage 2 plus tune on it. So I know that this car was pushed to its limits. I suspect the short block was pushed to its limits. It finally blew a head gasket, and then periodically, the owner of the car actually fired it up and then actually wore those rings and those cylinder walls a lot more because there was coolant in there and didn't have good lubrication to prevent scoring or wearing those cylinder walls. So I think that could be some of the reason that I have such a bad ring seal in this cylinder, or it could be a broken ringland or a bunch of other things. But either way, this short block definitely has to come out of this car. So as you guys can see behind me, I've got my engine hoist set up. In the next day or so, I'll be pulling this engine out of this car, and I'll be developing a plan for the new short block and the new engine that's been going in this car in place of it. And I'll give you guys a little hint, I'm definitely leaning towards going with an EJ207. So stay tuned, guys, because this EJ207 engine build is going to be an awesome one, and I think it's going to be a perfect match for this 1998 two-door coupe. If you guys have any questions or comments on this video or on any of the videos, go ahead and leave them in the comment section. If you guys need any parts or any maintenance items for Subaru, make sure you check out my SubaruONLY Amazon store, and you guys can see the link in the description below. In addition, if you guys need any factory service manuals or any technician guides or any other kind of Subaru literature that will help you work on your car, check out my SubaruONLY.com webpage. I got a bunch of great resources on that webpage, and I got all the factory service manuals from the early 1990s through 2020. Okay guys, thanks again for checking out the video. I really appreciate it. My name's Luke. You guys are watching a SubaruONLY channel. Until next time guys, later!